You know, some people are remembered for the lives they lived, others for the wars they fought. But it's a very, very rare person who actually becomes the war they fought. Today, we're diving into the incredible story of Yaa Asantewaa, a woman whose legacy is so much more than just a biography. Okay, so to get into this, let's start right here with this piece of modern money. This is a 20 cedi banknote from Ghana. And the woman on it, well, she's not just some historical figure. She is a true national icon. But who was she, really? And what could she possibly have done to earn a place like this in the hands and pockets of an entire country? And that's really the big question we're tackling today, isn't it? Because Yaa Asantewaa wasn't born a warrior. For most of her life, she was a farmer, a wife, a grandmother. So how does a person like that, at 60 years old, end up leading an army and becoming the face of a nation's resistance? Well, that is the story we are going to unpack right now. All right, so to understand the legend, you first have to understand the woman. Let's start with who she was before that image on the banknote ever existed. And this is what's so fascinating. That powerful face on the money belonged to a woman who, for almost her entire life, was a respected but pretty ordinary member of her community. I mean, she was a farmer who worked her own land. She believed every woman should have her own property. Now, she was a queen mother, yes, and that's a big deal, but her days weren't spent plotting wars. They were spent in the fields. So what on earth could happen to push a 60-year-old farmer to take on the most powerful empire in the world? To get that, we need to zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture. This was a fight for the very soul of a nation. See, this whole thing didn't just pop up out of nowhere. By 1900, the Ashanti Empire and the British had been fighting for nearly 100 years. It was a long, brutal series of conflicts. But the real turning point, the thing you gotta remember, is 1896. That's when the British captured the Ashanti king, their leader, Prempeh I, and sent him into exile. This left a huge power vacuum and a deeply humiliated people. Okay, and this is the absolute heart of the conflict, the Golden Stool. And look, we're not just talking about a fancy chair here. To the Ashanti people, the Sikajua Kofi was everything. It was their most sacred object. For them, it literally held the sunsun, the spirit, the soul of their entire nation. It was more important than any person, more valuable than any amount of gold. In fact, it was so holy, not even their king was allowed to sit on it. And then, in March of 1900, things just exploded. The new British governor, Sir Frederick Hodgson, calls a meeting of all the Ashanti chiefs, and completely oblivious to all this history and sacred meaning, he actually demands that they bring him the golden stool so that he can sit on it. It was an unbelievable act of arrogance, a profound insult, and it was the spark that lit the fuse. So you can imagine the crisis this created. With their king gone, the Ashanti leaders were, well, they were paralyzed. And right into that moment of fear and total indecision steps Yaa Asantewaa. So picture this. The governor makes this outrageous demand. The Ashanti chiefs, they all meet in secret, but they're demoralized. They're terrified of another war with the British. They argue, they hesitate, and ultimately, they do nothing. They're silent. And then she stands up. Yaa Asantewaa gets to her feet and just unleashes one of the most powerful speeches in history. She basically shames the men into action, reminding them of their brave ancestors. And she says, "If you will not fight, then we, the women, will. We will fight until the last of us falls." And just like that, everything changed. That was the moment. And these weren't just words. Not by a long shot. She immediately took charge, becoming the commander-in-chief of the rebellion. At 60 years old, she puts on the Batakara Kese, a sacred war dress, and she raises an army of 20,000 warriors. And then she leads them to lay siege to the British fort, trapping Governor Hodgson himself inside for months. So this war, which goes down in history as the War of the Golden Stool, was brutal. It raged for months. But here's the twist. How it ended on paper and what it actually came to mean, well, those are two totally different stories. Ultimately, the British military machine was just too powerful. Huge numbers of reinforcements finally arrived, they broke the siege, and they eventually captured Yaa Asantewaa and her inner circle. Just like her king, she was exiled to the Seychelles. She would never see her home again. So, if you're just looking at the military scorecard, it was a loss, a clear defeat. But, and this is the most important part of the whole story, while it was a military defeat, it was a massive symbolic victory. Because through it all, the British never
ever found the Golden Stool. Yaa Asantewaa's war guaranteed that the Sunsun, the soul of the Ashanti nation, remained free and in their possession. She may have lost the war, but she saved their identity. And it's that very idea, that victory in defeat, that lets her story take on a whole new life. Fast forward a few decades, Ghana's pushing for independence, and they need heroes, they need symbols. And her story, it was absolutely perfect. You know, there's actually a term for this. It's called symbolic nationalism. It's when a new country consciously uses figures and stories from its past to forge a new shared identity. Basically, you use icons, money, museums, all that stuff to build a shared story for a new nation. And Yaa Asantewaa was the ideal symbol of courage and resistance. And once you know to look for it, you see it everywhere. Take this sign. It's at the Ghana Armed Forces Museum, which is, and you gotta love the irony here, located in the exact same fort that she laid siege to. And notice what it's called. Not just the War of the Golden Stool, but the Yaa Asantewaa War. She didn't just fight the war. She became the war. I mean, this transformation is just mind-blowing. On the left, that's the actual jail cell where the British imprisoned her. Today, it's a place of honor, a symbol of resistance. And on the right, you see a statue of her at the National Museum. She's not shown as a prisoner. She's a defiant commander in her war dress.
And this isn't just ancient history. Her legacy is still being built. Right now, the statue went up as recently as 2009. And get this, it was partly funded by people from the African diaspora all the way over in Canada. Her story of defiance has gone global.
And it's not just about statues. Her memory is a living thing. They hold these massive festivals in her honor every 2 years, celebrating what she represents, the heroism of the African woman. It's a way of keeping her spirit and what she stands for alive and well today. So, when you put it all together, you've got postage stamps calling her a woman achiever, you've got a top girl school named after her, and of course, the banknotes we started with. Her image and story have been woven into the very fabric of modern Ghana. She has gone from being a hero to the Ashanti people to being a hero for the entire nation. And that really brings us full circle, doesn't it? Yaa Asantewaa was defeated on the battlefield, she was captured, she was exiled, and she died thousands of miles from her home. And yet, more than a century later, it's her story, her image, and her spirit that have triumphed. She lost the war, but she absolutely won the narrative. Which kind of leaves us with a pretty big question. What does that tell us about what truly defines a victory?